birthday has been celebrated with one of the greatest military displays anywhere in the world. Over 1,000 men, over 300 musicians, over 200 horses, all of them here on Horse Guards Parade in London, ready for the ceremony of trooping the colour. We're standing by for a feast of music and military precision, without forgetting that many of the men on ceremony today have seen active service in Kosovo, in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Rapid fire! Present arms! Fight through! Fight through! Escort to the colour! Eyes!
Once again this year, we've been blessed with some decent weather for this Queen's Birthday Parade of 2004. Not quite the endless sunshine of last year, but the sun is nonetheless peeping through now and again, and it's dry, which is the main thing, so we're grateful for that. Now, the main players of today's show are making their way into Horse Guards Parade right now, and they are the Inkerman Company of the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, the second most senior company in the Grenadiers, and their history goes right back to the reign of Charles II in the mid-17th century. They are, I need hardly tell you, very proud indeed of their heritage. I have two companions today in the BBC commentary box. First is a former guardsman who commanded the parade himself in 1991, very successfully, I must say, Lieutenant Colonel Gerald Laginski, and also with me is the BBC's Claire Balding, whose expert knowledge of all things equestrian will be very, very useful for all of us today. Claire and Gerald, a delight to have you both with us. And Claire, what are you looking forward to today?
Well, Hugh, I've never actually seen the Queen's Birthday Parade live, so I feel like a wide-eyed 7-year-old. I'm just looking forward to enjoying the spectacle and rather glad that it's cooler than it has been earlier in the week for the sake of the horses. We're going to see over 200 of them here on parade, and I just hope that they behave themselves and we don't get any loose horses galloping across the middle.
Gerald, you're a stickler for military precision. What are you looking forward to today?
Well, I hope that Claire's in for a treat today. We've got a nice bit of breeze to lift the heat, and I'm looking for high standards, for steadiness, for confidence, for teamwork and a bit of style. And I hope that the men on parade enjoy themselves.
Well, the crowds have been gathering since early this morning. They're lining St James's Park, young and old, just away, across the way from Horse Guards Parade. Undaunted, I must say, by the massive security measures put in place in the area this year, given the worldwide terrorist alert. And enjoying a rather better vantage point, maybe, along the northern, eastern and southern flanks of Horse Guards Parade. There you see Mr Blair and Mrs Blair and Jeff Hoon, the Defence Secretary, among hundreds of dignitaries and lots of ambassadors too, representing many of the Commonwealth countries and elsewhere. Now, everything is virtually in place for this Queen's Birthday Parade. I've told you that the Inkerman Company is trooping the colour today. They're the main players in that sense, but there are 5 other guards on parade today too. Number 2 Guard is found by Number 2 Company. They're also Grenadier Guards. And some more Grenadier Guards at Number 3 Guard, which is found by Nijmegen Company. Number 4 Guard is found by F Company Scots Guards. And next door to them, Number 5 Guard is found by Number 2 Company, the 1st Battalion of Irish Guards. They were absent last year, by the way, because they were on active service in Iraq, where they won 3 military crosses, no less. One of the recipients is on parade today, Guardsman Anton Branchflower, the youngest army member to get an MC at the age of 19. And Number 6 Guard, formed up at right angles to the other 5, is found by Number 7 Company Coldstream Guards. They're performing the same function, same position as they did a year ago. I think it's fair to say that all eyes, including crucially the Queen's, will be on the Inkerman Company today to see how well they acquit themselves in today's parade. Last year, by the way, they formed the number 3 Guard on Horse Guards. The company was named after the famous battle in the Crimean War 150 years ago. Grenadiers lost half their men in a battle that lasted 8 hours, which at that time was a very long battle indeed. The Grenadiers were the only regiment to take part, to fly their colours. Well, today's men are very proud of that heritage, and some of them recently made a pilgrimage to the site of the Battle of Inkerman.
The sheer thought of having to fight your way up through the St Clement's Ravine is just one of the most horrendous experiences. It's extremely steep, very difficult on foot. Coming under a hail of Minier fire would have been awful.
The Russians attacked up a steep ravine. They were fighting to seize the British guns, which were on what became known as the Sandbag Battery.
It changed hands 7 times in all, and 4 of those times happened within 45 minutes of the guards arriving.
The battle was dubbed the Soldiers' Battle because so many officers were killed. The Grenadiers lost half their men.
There were Russians swarming over the battery, and the colours that were flying inside the battery were going down behind a pile of Russians, and they were just greatcoats all over the colours. So Russell and Palmer charged back into the battery through the embrasure, and Russell with his sword managed to clear the Russians away from the colours and save the colours by their charge.
It's incredible to think the battle was actually fought here. How brave the men were. It's amazing.
What it has certainly done is created an awareness of the history that it has led up to the name of the Inkerman Company.
It's hugely moving to hear, actually. To finally come to the place that I've heard about for so long and actually be talked through the battle and see where the British dead were, the Russian dead were, and the huge quantity of casualties.
You're surrounded, I guess, by the bodies of people who were in the Grenadier Guards 150 years ago.
A new memorial is now being erected to commemorate the battle, just a few hundred yards away from the Sandbag Battery.
Gentlemen, I give you the heroes of Inkerman.
The heroes of Inkerman.
Back on Horse Guards, the colour party is in position, and they're protecting the colour before it's trooped down the ranks. Colour Sergeant today is Michael O'Halloran. He saw active service in the Gulf War of the early 90s. He's in charge of the colour right now. And the double sentry is the symbol of protection. It's being provided today by Guardsmen David Bradley and Adam Anstey. The Queen's colour itself is a wonderful sight. It's made of crimson silk, presented to the battalion by the Queen here on Horse Guards some 14 years ago. Regiment has 77 battle honours, going back incredibly to Tangier in 1680, most recent honour being the Gulf War of 1991. More evidence for you, if it was needed, that the men on ceremony today are trained and they're ready for active service.
We are infanteers as well as the ceremonial side, and we come out here to test the battalion to make sure they're fit enough and good enough to be called for if the need should arise to go into a conflict.
The Inkerman Company's camp is just 75 miles north of the equator. The temperatures reach 50 degrees.
Because of the terrain, 2, the temperature and the weather as well, it's very similar to what we would do. I mean, it's the closest you come to real wartime situations.
Tomorrow, for the first time, the company will be using live ammunition.
We very rarely practice with live ammunition. We use blanks, and with blank ammunition you don't get the realism, the effects of the weapon, the noise of the weapon, the actual fear that actually what you're firing is very dangerous as opposed to a blank. So the men, when you use live ammunition with them, their drills click in.
Leave them off, okay, for power.
Second Lieutenant Gabriel York is fresh from Sandhurst.
Cut-off groups already in place.
When I was told I was coming straight to battalion, it was panic, to be honest. I had hoped, I had left a lot of learning for this extra 4-month course coming in the future. and was hoping to brush up a few things there. So it did change the last 2 weeks at Sandhurst into a bit of a learning session.
Ambush will be sprung, rifleman single shot.
Feeling quite excited. There are a lot of decisions that have to be made on the ground. There's only so much preparation you can do before, making sure all your guardsmen are drinking enough water, and for myself, making sure I understand what the company commander is trying to get out of me.
Any worries?
No worries.
After a nighttime ambush exercise, the company have had just a couple of hours sleep.
It's now 7:30 in the morning. We're waiting orders. We expect in the next couple of hours we'll put in an attack on an airport a couple of kilometres to the north. As part of the scenario, an airbase being used by terrorists working in Kenya.
Okay, this is a set of orders for a deliberate company attack, final phase of the battle exercise. The ground on the position is open. There's very little cover over this area. All the trees have been removed as it was an airfield. Okay, enemy forces. It's my intent to destroy the enemy on the airfield by conducting a sequential daylight company attack. Gabriel?
Move! Fire! Fire from 10 Alpha. Left hand position. Right. Stop doing it now. Out. Move back up to the bunker and see if you can start taking the position from the right flank. Target being taken.
Well done! Well done, come on!
Come on, well done.
Hey, well done, boys. Well done.
The first live firing exercise I've done was a bit confusing. Everything's going on around you. Traffic's coming over the radio, you're being told to do things, you don't know if it's for you, for other people. Was helped out a little bit by my platoon sergeant this time round. So I think we managed to pull it off, but I can honestly say that I was fully aware of what was going on at all times. I think on the day of achieving the colour, I'll actually be more nervous than this. I think it'll probably be the most nerve-wracking thing I've done, or could possibly do.
The officers have just taken post on Horse Guards Parade, including 2nd Lieutenant Gabriel York, whom we saw in Kenya there, because he has a big responsibility today. He is the ensign for the escort to the colour. He's the man who will be carrying the colour through the ranks today, and it's a tremendous honour for him. He has just 6 months service under his belt. He's already served as an Arabic interpreter in Iraq. The subaltern for the escort today is Captain Thorold Youngman Sullivan, who's due tomorrow to take over command of Nijmegen Company Grenadier Guards. Today is number 3 guard, so our congratulations to him. And the captain for the escort is Major Nicholas Hender, company commander of the Inkerman Company. But no doubt that the man in overall charge of today's parade, the big boss, apart from the Queen of course, once again this year is Lieutenant Colonel George Norton, Field Officer in Brigade Waiting, Commanding Officer of the parade. Lieutenant Colonel Norton had a very successful parade last year, and this year is his last, because word is that he's being promoted and will soon be sent to serve in Afghanistan. Gerald, a big burden on George Norton's shoulders.
Indeed it is. He's got to remember something over 180 words of command and get him in the right sequence. Ride a horse in a relatively high pressure situation, which for an infantryman is asking a lot. But most importantly, like the captain of a sports team or the conductor of an orchestra, he's got to lead the more than 1,000 men on parade. It's his poise, his confidence and projection of his voice and his personality that's the key to a good parade. And to do that in front of his sovereign, all the spectators that we've got here on Horse Guards, you, Hugh and me and the countless viewers, is a pretty tall order.
Queen is due on Horse Guards at the stroke of 11 o'clock and she's leaving Buckingham Palace right now. It is her 52nd parade. It's worth repeating that. Her 52nd parade. She's missed only one since 1951. That was in 1956 when a national rail strike forced the cancellation of the parade that year. She's making the journey today in the ivory-mounted phaeton. For the second year running, she's accompanied in the phaeton by the Duke of Edinburgh. He's Colonel of the Grenadier Guards, of course. Crowds gathering outside Buckingham Palace already, and they'll wisely stay put because after the Queen's birthday parade, royal family will return to the palace and there'll be the traditional fly past after the parade has finished, so it's a very good vantage point for them. Queen being accompanied today by the Sovereign's escort, which consists of 7 officers and 107 other ranks of the household cavalry. A short distance away, first carriage of royal guests is arriving at Horse Guards. They're on the approach road. And today, those guests include, in the first carriage, the Countess of Wessex and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester and Rear Admiral Timothy Lawrence. And in the second carriage today, we'll see the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, Princess Alexandra and Sir Angus Ogilvy. The royal guests arrive. They'll see that number 3 guard has reformed to allow them a point of entry onto Horse Guards Parade and the first royal salute of the day. And of all the guests here today, these will possibly have the best vantage point of all because they'll be watching the parade from a window above Horse Guards Arch. They're making their way towards the arch right now. Because above the arch is the office which was once occupied by the Duke of Wellington, no less. It's occupied today by Major General Sebastian Roberts, who commands the Household Division. And we've been very lucky because Major General Sebastian Roberts very kindly gave us a personal guided tour.
One of the great aspects of this wonderful job is the office that I work in, which we're in now. It was originally built and used as the office of the Commander-in-Chief of the Army from the mid-18th century till late in the 19th century. And it was then occupied by, some very, very famous people. The Grand Old Duke of York, well known in nursery rhyme, was the Commander-in-Chief for a long time. And later still, the Duke of Wellington, whose desk this is, And around the office, there are paintings, sculptures that reflect and record the history. The portraits on the walls here of King George III, which was here in Wellington's time. Wellington himself is here. This marble bust was taken from his death mask. And as we move round, there are other artifacts. This is the portrait of General George Monk, later the Duke of Albemarle, who was the first colonel of what is now known as the Coldstream Guards, the regiment with which he effected, in a very real sense, the restoration of the monarchy. Moving on round, we come to one of two letters from Florence Nightingale to one of my predecessors about the welfare of troops shortly after the Crimea, troops who would have fought probably at Inkerman. And it's also, of course, from the windows here that the royal family watched the parade.
Lovely view from the window. And back on Horse Guards itself, the scene is now almost set for this Queen's Birthday Parade of 2004. It was in 1805 that the custom of trooping the colour to honour the sovereign's birthday was initiated, but it's known that the Household Division carried out a similar ceremony as early as 1755, possibly. But in all its forms, of course, the main focus is the colour itself and what that colour represents to the men who rally to it.
When I heard it was going to be me to be the ensign, it's a little bit of disbelief and thought it was a prank because there were quite a few names flying around and it took a while for it to be confirmed. And then when it was finally confirmed, I think excitement and then the reality of the pressure. So really it's quite an honour, especially talking to the past ensigns, and they emphasise what a fabulous day it is when it comes and the importance attached to it.
Cat! Up! This. Gather in, sir.
The colours originally were the means by which a battalion was identified on the battlefield. And they would be the rallying point of a battalion in battle. I should think it was a not only dangerous but terrifying job to be the ensign. Clearly, in just the same way as the colour was important to us, it would also have been important to the enemy. If the colour was lost, then the battle would be lost.
The colour to me, it symbolises the life of the regiment that should be the centre of pride for everyone in the battalion. It still symbolises what dying soldiers rallied round, what they sought to defend at their last moment. So for me it's the core of battalion life, what every soldier feels, should feel, he's represented by.
Pride of Gabriel York, who's the ensign today, and a lot of weight on his shoulders. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh are making steady progress along the Mall, which is lined as ever by crowds of all ages. They're eager to see one of the more colourful pageants in the British calendar. It's always a treat. Leading the way is the Sovereign's escort. The Household Cavalry consists of two regiments, the Life Guards and the Blues and Royals. And they are the senior regiments of the British Army. They are the personal bodyguards of the Sovereign. And they've been working very hard in the past few weeks, as Claire has been finding out for us.
Guns called Khalid! Guns called Bannon! Duke Martin! Hawley! Wilson!
Now this is a bit bigger than I'm used to. This is Valerian, who I'm going to ride today on an early morning exercise. I had to put my smart kit on. And this is a very uncomfortable military saddle. Oof, I wouldn't want to sit in this for hours on end, but they do. The only thing they haven't told me is what happens when it goes wrong. You know, what if I get run away with in Hyde Park? Riding right in the middle of the division now. It's meant to be sitting trot, but I can't do that. And all the time you're worrying about controlling these animals. I don't know how they're doing it in sitting trot. Ooh. Good boy.
It was just desperately uncomfortable.
It is. I mean, it is uncomfortable. Some of these horses have a very difficult action, sort of choppy action, which naturally makes the riders bounce up and down. So to be able to ride them well and actually look good at the same time is quite a difficult thing to manage. And you've got to appreciate that the majority of these guys have not actually ridden before they joined the army. The army put them through the riding course, and for them to actually be out here on parade is quite an achievement on their behalf.
You set the pace for the whole division.
Yes.
And the worst thing for them must be if you go too slowly.
Well, if I go too slowly, they all pile into each other. If I go too fast, then the guys at the back are going to be trotting. And also, having ridden at the back myself, I know what it's like. So you've got, you learn to appreciate what the others are feeling.
Is there any artificial way of making it right?
No, just practice. Yeah. However hard the work may be getting to that standard, everyone can put their hand on the heart and feel that they've achieved something. Not everyone can say they've been on a Queen's birthday parade. Not everyone can say they've escorted the Sovereign. And it's something to be proud of.
From training to the real thing, the Queen's birthday parade. Claire, it's quite a contrast.
It certainly is. It was very funny actually riding in Hyde Park, because as I said in that piece, I was doing rising trot, everybody else was doing sitting trot, and that's what I was meant to be doing. And the riding master, Dickie Waygard, came galloping from the back because one of the troopers had complained and shouted at me, "Trooper Balding, sitting trot!" I said, "I can't." The saddle is very different, and it's designed to spread the weight across the horse's back, but it's rather uncomfortable for the rider.
Well, there are 4 divisions of the Sovereign's escort, leading the way for the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. First and second divisions who lead the escort are found by the Blues and Royals this year. They carry the Sovereign standard, which was presented by the Queen last year. And at the end of the procession, the third and fourth divisions of the Sovereign's escort found by the Life Guards. And by the way, the Household Cavalry has recently deployed 2 squadrons to Iraq, and a further squadron has just returned from Bosnia. So the Sovereign's escort leads the Queen towards Horse Guards Parade. It's an incredible sight, of course, and that explains the presence of thousands of people in these crowds today who just want to wonder at the glinting badges and buckles and the shining shoes and the wonderful condition of all the livery. It's a wonderful sight indeed. St James's Park, as ever, is crammed full with people, and they'll be bagging all the best vantage points for this birthday parade. Queen's coachman today is Colin Henderson. He's riding St Patrick, and the handheld horse is Auckland. And the saddlecloths, by the way, are the ones the Queen used to use when she rode on parade. They show the insignia of the Grenadiers. The coachman is now preparing to salute the colour, and he'll do so with his whip. He's followed by 3 other Royal Colonels: the Prince of Wales, Colonel of the Welsh Guards, Princess Royal, Colonel of the Blues and Royals, and the Duke of Kent, who's Colonel of the Scots Guards. It's worth noting that this is not the Queen's real birthday. Maybe I should point that out. That's on the 21st of April. It's her official birthday, and that practice was revived by Edward VII around a century ago, when he decided that he'd rather like to celebrate his birthday in decent weather. Of course, we know that June isn't a guarantee of that in Britain, but it's a fair bet that there'll be a little bit of sun. Today is one of those typical June days in Britain. A little bit of sunshine and some cloud too. So as the Queen and the Duke approach the dais, we will await the first royal salute. In effect, it's the first happy birthday of the day. The signal for that will be given by the field officer in brigade waiting, Lieutenant Colonel George Norton, who's in position directly opposite the arch in front of the Guards Memorial there, the edge of St James's Park.
Royal salute! Present! Arms! Guards! Slow! Arms! Shoulder! Arms!
So the first royal duty is to inspect the line when the Queen casts a long, careful, experienced eye the lines of guardsmen. She does so. The massed bands, directed by Major Andrew Chatburn, Senior Director of Music, the Guards Division, will play the slow march, Green and Pleasant Land. And, the Queen is preceded by the Brigade Major, Lieutenant Colonel David Russell Parsons of the Grenadier Guards, and 4 troopers of the Life Guards. This is where the Queen has a long, hard look to see if everything's up to scratch. Gerald, what does it mean to the Guardsmen when the Queen passes and has that look at them?
Well, they know that this is not just a symbolic inspection. Every man on parade knows that he's under a very expert eye. As well as on these major state ceremonial occasions, Her Majesty sees her guards on a daily basis at the royal palaces and at Windsor Castle. And so she knows what she's looking for. One nice thing is that from time to time, if a guardsman on sentry performs particularly well, if he's exceptionally alert and smart, for example, then word is passed from Her Majesty to the guardroom, and the man can be ordered what's called a credit. 2 credits, and you have a weekend's leave. Mind you, the standards do have to be exceptionally high.
Sure they do. Music changes. So a combined quick march, Anglo-Airs, arranged by Major Burton. Queen's procession moves along the approach road behind number 5 guard to inspect mounted bands of the Household Cavalry. Queen today wearing a bright yellow silk dress by Carl Ludwig, so the palace tells us. The matching coat and the hat is by Philip Somerville, wearing a brooch, the Brigade of Guards. The coachman prepares to salute the sovereign standard, the Blues and Royals. The Royal Colonel's salute, and Queen prepares past the Guards Memorial at the side of St James's Park. As she does so, all thoughts on this parade ground will turn to those soldiers lost in Iraq over the past year. Then we go past the Life Guards and the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. They'll be playing a dramatic part later on. And the salute there, by the way, was for the guns, which in this instance holds the same significance as the colour. And at the rear of the procession today, as it returns to the dais, the Major General commanding the Household Division, Major General Sebastian Roberts. He gave us the guided tour earlier on. Well, he's been sharing his thoughts with us on his first birthday parade, on the symbolism and on the spectacle.
It's, I think, best described. It was best described by Ninette de Valois, who used to come every year and said that for her it was the greatest ballet in the world. And that is part of the truth about it. This celebration of the Queen's birthday, the monarch's birthday, a celebration for everybody in the United Kingdom, is at one level a huge bit of ceremonial theatre. It's also a very historic event. People definitely regard it as an honour. There is a certain thrill taking part in these enormous and very well-known parades. It can get pretty routine, but of course it can't get too routine because we're also guarding the Queen.
Major General Sebastian Roberts likening the parade to a form of ballet, which I'm sure will be an interesting comparison for lots of the guardsmen. But I think we know what he meant. We're now approaching what is a favourite part of this parade for lots of you, because you very kindly sent us lots of letters after last year's parade telling us how much you enjoy the troop, the massed bands who will troop and play lots of wonderful music. Music, of course, playing such an important part in this parade. It's good for settling the nerves too. Lots of guardsmen telling us that the music is good, they relax and they perform well. Led by Senior Drum Major Andy Gray. We start with the very popular march Les Huguenots by Meyerbeer. lies on the front row, waiting for the special signal, the raised trombone, to mark a change of direction for the mass bands. Wonderful Les Huguenots by Meyerbeer. As we go to the quick march, Punkinello by Rimmer, which, by the way, has never been used before for the Queen's birthday parade. The lone drummer breaks away, marching to a position to the right of the escort facing Horse Guards Arch. And this is Lance Corporal Robert King of the Grenadier Guards. He's not just a drummer, by the way, he's also a bugler. He's the best bugler in the Household Division, I'm told, and he's wearing his recent award for that today. When he gets to his position, his drummer's call will be a command for officers to take post and a signal to all of us that the next phase of this parade is about to start. A crucial moment when they begin to troop the colour through the ranks. Guardsman Robert Dagger Dawson makes his way across to the Sergeant Major, Bernie Broad, and he'll relieve him of his pace stick, and that will enable Bernie Broad significantly to draw his sword, because this is the only time a Sergeant Major draws his sword on parade. The famous eyes front, perfectly timed as ever, and done remarkably without any word of command. The escort steps off on its way to escort the colour, marching the very famous tune of the British Grenadiers. It's the big moment for the Inkerman Company. They are, I think it's fair to say, the stars of this parade today. Gerald, a very proud moment for them.
It is indeed. And what one's looking for is a purposeful air of measured confidence with a bit of a flourish. And I think they're producing that at the moment. They're marching to the British Grenadiers, the regimental march, but in fact, historically, all British infantry regiments had a company of grenadiers, normally the tallest and strongest men in the battalion, who paraded on the right of the line. So whenever a colour is trooped by whichever regiment, the escort for the colour always marches forward to the British Grenadiers.
So the escort will march towards the colour. They'll stop some 20 paces before reaching it, and then the music will stop. Be waiting for the field officer and brigade waiting, Lieutenant Colonel George Norton, to bring the entire parade to attention. What a moment for Sergeant Major, Warrant Officer Class 1, Bernie Broad. Very proud day for him. I'll tell you why. It's his last parade as Sergeant Major, because after this, he's going to be commissioned as an officer in the Grenadier Guards. So he now prepares to take possession of the colour, protecting it with his sword, and then he'll be ready to hand it over to the ensign. Safely transferred, and now from the old hand, if you'll forgive me, to the new young Grenadier, 2nd Lieutenant Gabriel York, today's ensign, will receive the colour ready for the trooping. And to maximise protection of the colour, the 4 non-commissioned officers on the flanks turn outwards and port arms. Now entered a new phase in the parade. Escort for the colour, having taken possession, has now become escort to the colour. And all subsequent orders will reflect this change after the colour party takes its place among the escort. The escort now advances in slow time as the bands play Escort to the Colour, the march adapted from Waldteufel's waltz, the Grenadiers. The bands, however, have a slight problem here. They need to change direction and they have very little room for manoeuvre, so they execute what they call a spin wheel. Gerald, it's a bit of a magical mystery tour, isn't it, this spin wheel business?
That's true, Hugh. I've absolutely no idea what goes on in there. The spin wheel, as you suggest, it's a black art known only to musicians and the Garrison Sergeant Major. I mean, it's alleged that the manoeuvre's not written down anywhere, and that the intricacies of it are passed down from senior musicians to young ones over the years. And there they are. They've done it.
Wonderful. Claire, the precision is quite remarkable, isn't it?
I have to say, watching this in the flesh for the first time, I can't get over the rhythm to it. I mean, the quality of the music, first of all. And secondly, the fact that everything seems to be done with such dignity. There's no panic. It just, rather like that spin wheel, it happens. And you watch in awe as everything works out precisely to the second.
The escort marches forward, every guardsman aware of the historical significance of the trooping that is about to happen. For the ensign, Gabriel York, bears the colour, there's no doubting the honour. In a few moments the music will cut out. The oldest part of the ceremony, the trooping, can then begin. Music changes to the Grenadiers' slow march. Underlining the splendour of this state occasion. We're talking here about a simple exercise, really, because in the early days of warfare, flags or colours were used by military leaders as rallying points or assembly points. And it was vital, of course, that every soldier could recognise his own unit's flag or colour. And what happened was that it became practice to carry or troop the colour down the ranks at the end of a day's march, then escort it to the place where it would be lodged for the night, and that's why it was known as lodging the colour. As time passed, the colour became less important in terms of operations, but much more important in terms of morale. The colour became, in effect, an object of reverence, and it embodied the spirit and the traditions of the unit. Gerald, is that overstating it?
No, I think not, Hugh. It may just look like a bit of crimson silk with some gold braid on it, but it is of very real significance to every guardsman. It's presented by the Sovereign, the Colonel-in-Chief. But when you look at the colour of it, it's as if it's drenched in the blood of the thousands of men who've fallen in battle over the last 450 years that the regiment's been in existence. Its symbolism is something that every young guardsman learns right at the start of his service.
So the trooping is done. And we move to the next phase of this Queen's Birthday Parade of 2004. We have next is a prolonged series of orders designed to bring the Guards into their new positions, ready for this next phase, as the Queen prepares to take the salute.
Numbers 1 to 5 guard will retire. About turn. But behold, right form. Quick march.
Guards march off to the sound of the fifes and drums as they play Dashing White Sergeant, arranged by Pope, arranged as a march for the Corps of Drums. It's perhaps the best known of the Scottish country dances, taking us back to the days of Marlborough, when they were played as the soldiers marched into battle. Gerald, it's a very special sound.
It is indeed, particularly since the drummers who are playing the fifes and the drums are not trained musicians when they arrive there. I mean, they learn it with the battalion.
Numbers 1 to 5 guard will advance. About turn.
The orders are given by Lieutenant Colonel George Norton. He's riding Thor today. And Thor is quite a character, Claire, isn't he?
Well, he is. He's 19 years old now, Thor is. And you'd think with age, possibly a little wisdom and experience may come. But he's very noisy. He has a habit of whinnying. He's been very, very good today. He actually was kicked out of the Household Cavalry because he kept biting other horses. And then they realised that when he's on his own, he's absolutely fine. He likes to be the star of the show, but sometimes George Norton's orders can be drowned slightly by Thor's noises. He's been perfect so far today.
He's a little noisy last year, but he's very good today, it must be said.
Will march past in slow and quick time. By the left.
We're preparing for the first march past the days. In slow time, the Queen will prepare to take the salute. Music is a neutral slow march, themes from Faust by Gounod. Neutral in the sense that it's not connected to any regiment, it's not tribal in that sense. guards are getting into position, ready for the slow march past the Queen. Timing is critical. They have to get off in perfect shape. And Gerald, I suppose it's fair to say that the slow march is deceptively easy, isn't it? It looks like a bit of a stroll, but tell us what the difficulties are on horse guards.
No, you're quite right, Hugh. Actually, it's a lot more difficult than it seems. There's nowhere to practice for a start. I mean, there's nowhere big enough for the guardsmen to practice this manoeuvre. And also the surface. It's gravelled, as you can see, for the horses, but it's a nightmare to march on. Particularly since from up here it looks relatively level, but when you get down at ground level it's full of dips and gullies and the gravel builds up in drifts. And I reckon actually they're doing very well at the moment.
Everything in sparkling condition today. And Claire, we mentioned Thor, but it's worth mentioning some of the other horses too.
Well, at the moment they're all behaving impeccably, and I always think it's an extraordinary thing. A horse is a very fragile beast, and it has a temperament that is quite difficult to control. And given the music of the band and the spectators around and the colours, they are behaving just perfectly. They're keeping very calm, and they have to maintain a rhythm as well. And I imagine there are some horses that are rather better at doing a slow march than others.
And we can have a good look there at number 3 guard, found by Nijmegen Company of Grenadier Guards, commemorating the famous World War II battle, which involved the Guards Armoured Division, the bridge at Nijmegen. It was fought following the D-Day landings. And I think it's fair to say that those qualities of initiative and courage are still very much in evidence today. Now, the first march past is about to start. Cannon Corner, as it's known, just behind Downing Street on Horse Guards Parade, gets a little congested at this time, which is why the timing has to be so perfect. But that will soon be dealt with because the march past will happen as the Queen takes the salute. Once again, the expert eye of the Queen on all that she surveys. Every guardsman taking part today knows that. Music changes to the Grenadier Guards slow march, Scipio, taken from Handel's opera of the same name. First performed in London in 1726. The colour will be lowered by the ensign. It's called the flourish, and the Queen will acknowledge it. Colour is raised again. That's known as the recover. The 2 guard passing the dais for the salute. We're still with Grenadiers, of course, at this stage, as we will be with number 3. Which is why we still have the Grenadier Guard slow march for these first 3 guards. changes for number 4 Guard, F Company Scots Guards. They march past to their slow march, Garb of Old Gaul. Another change for number 5 Guard. Number 2 Company, 1st Battalion Irish Guards, marching past to Let Erin Remember. It's the first time in several years that we've seen the Irish Guards at this parade. And a final change. This slow march. Number 6 Guard, found by number 7 Company Coldstream Guards, marching past to their slow march, Mozart's Figaro. And at the rear of the last guard is the adjutant of the parade, is Captain Alex Cartwright, whose father, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cartwright, is a former grenadier, one of the Queen's equerries in waiting. He's also taking part in the parade, so they're probably the only father and son on the parade ground, part that is from the Duke of Edinburgh and the Prince of Wales. So the field officer in brigade waiting, Lieutenant Colonel George Norton, rides out to salute the Queen in his special way, now that the slow march past is complete. The sword is drawn, but it's a special salute intended to convey no threat at all to the monarch.
And this time he's able to turn Thor away and walk back forwards. Earlier on in the parade he had to do a rein back, which is a reverse the whole way down the middle line of Horse Guards Parade, which is a very difficult thing to achieve. In a normal dressage test you might rein back 4 strides or maybe 6, but he was doing more like 20, and Thor as yet has been silent, which is what we want.
I think it's what we say is out of character, Claire.
I rather like that part of his nature, that he's a bit of a showman, you know.
So as the guards prepare for the march past in quick time, I think it's a good time for us to remind ourselves of these magnificent surroundings here. Horse Guards itself, built in 1745, originally a barrack for 2 troops of the Royal Horse Guards. Site was part of Henry VIII's labyrinthine Palace of Whitehall. These days it's the headquarters of the London District and the Household Division. As we've already seen, the occupant of the Duke of Wellington's old office is now Maj Gen Sebastian Roberts, commanding the Household Division. Casting his eye on the area, Lord Nelson, dominating the skyline behind the old Admiralty building, which was designed in the 1720s, and the boardroom there is still used by the Navy Board, but the building is now used, mostly anyway, by the travel unit of the Foreign Office. Just to the left, the Citadel, built at the start of the Second World War, a bomb-proof extension to the Admiralty where wartime operations were planned, and with its very famous grass roof and ivy front, it's a very familiar sight. The Citadel is also a very useful vantage point for today's parade.
Quick, time! Quick, march!
So the march past in quick time starts, the style changes, the tempo quickens, there's a new sense of energy and dynamism. Grenadiers, of course, are British Army's senior infantry regiment. They were formed by Lord Wentworth in 1656 for Charles II, while he was in exile during Cromwell's time. And since that time, they fought in almost every major campaign of the British Army. Gerald, always good for them to stretch their legs at this stage.
Absolutely, Hugh. It's a much more lively and brisk rhythm, and the guards are going to swing their arms. Having said that, It means that you have to move slightly apart in the ranks to swing the arm freely, which makes it more difficult to keep your dressing.
The neutral quick march, first of all. Children of the Regiment by Fučík, Czech composer, which was last used in 1992. He was a pupil of Dvořák, by the way. Gerald, I'm fascinated now that the pace has changed. How do they make sure that they're properly in line? It seemed that they had more time last time to make sure that they were absolutely bang on target. There's less room for... This has to be precise, hasn't it?
Yes, it's much more difficult. Because what they're doing is changing direction without changing formation. And for this, teamwork is the key. You have to have confidence in the man on your left and right and work together. Each man brings the other round in a steady, measured pace, with no sudden dramatic adjustments by an individual, because it throws out the whole line. Actually, it looks as though they're doing pretty well at the moment.
And again, how much practice would go into this?
This is something you can practice to a certain extent on the squares in the barracks, but not on the surface we've got at Horse Guards. It's interesting, some of the old and bold say it's not as good as it was in our day, but of course, some years ago, they practiced for this for 4, 5, 6 months, whereas today, these men have got all sorts of commitments in addition to the ceremonial.
They approach the dais once again, quick time, and we look forward to the Grenadier Guards Quick March, the British Grenadiers, which we've already heard once. Wonderful tune, so it's always good to hear it again. Duke of Edinburgh, Colonel of the Grenadier Guards, of course. Quick change for the Scots Guards and their quick march, Heelan Laddie. Another change for the Irish Guards and their quick march, St. Patrick's Day. Change for the Coldstream Guards and their quick march, Milanolo. Field officer rides out, salutes the Queen again with his sword. It's worth underlining that no other monarch can match the record of attendance of Queen Elizabeth II at this parade. Her father, George VI, was also enthusiastic, as were George V and Edward VII, but I can tell you that Queen Victoria officially attended just one birthday parade in her long reign. It marked her 76th birthday. And it didn't take place here, by the way. It took place at Windsor in May 1895. And she stated rather primly that it was a very pretty sight. The bands played rather well. But on the neutral quick march, which is Kaiser Frederick by Friedemann, so the foot guards are reforming, taking their position once again, as they were before. The western flank of Horse Guards Parade, as they prepare for the turn of the mounted troops to pass the dais and salute the Queen.
Officers, take post! Quick, march!
The ensign is back in position with the colour. His duty is done.
Guards! In open order! Left and right! Dress!
Husbands! Movement to the right! Right!
Senior Drum Major Andy Gray gives the order. The massed bands march to one side. Marching off to Hazelmere, marched by Tom Burkitt. Originally entitled Colonel Gooch in honour of the commanding officer of the day. And in the background, you can see the massed bands moving out of the way for the mounted bands. Mounted bands of the Household Cavalry moving onto the north side of Horse Guards, led by the Director of Music of the Blues and Royals, Major Douglas Robertson. And two of the most popular members of today's parade, the drum horses, the Household Cavalry, Horatius and Spartacus. Horatius is ridden today by Warrant Officer Class 2 Tim Francis. Horatius' stable name, by the way, is Norman. He's a Blues and Royals horse. Spartacus, or Sparky, is a lifeguard's horse. He's on his 5th birthday parade. He's ridden today by Lance Corporal of Horse Stuart Marsh. Marching on to the neutral walk past, Aida trooping, Tomlinson's arrangement of Verdi.
Amazes me that the musicians here can do such a good job of playing while riding at the same time, and particularly Corporal of the Horse Stuart Marsh and Warrant Officer Tim Francis on the 2 drum horses, who are steering those horses with their feet while they play the drums.
As the mounted band moves to the centre, the King's Troop, Royal Horse Artillery, makes its usual dramatic entrance. Always a big impact when they arrive here on Horse Guards. These big 13-pound guns are the real thing. They were all used in action in the First World War. The guns are in effect the colour of the King's Troop. It's worth noting that when we think of the technical aspects of modern warfare, that in their day these guns were the most advanced artillery ever made. King's Troop, Royal Horse Artillery prepare for the walk past to the Royal Artillery Slow March, written and dedicated to the regiment by the Duchess of Kent, who was the mother of Queen Victoria. Queen will acknowledge the first section or pair of guns. Following the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery is the Household Cavalry. Standard bearer, Squadron Corporal Major Paul Thomas of the Blues and Royals. Mounted on their glorious black horses, all of them from Ireland. And standard bearer, Squadron Corporal Major Kevin Pointer. Remarkable to think, Claire, that lots of these men today are not experienced riders. 95%
of them had never ridden until they joined the Household Cavalry. In fact, I talked to one trooper who had a phobia of horses, was terrified of them, because as a youngster he'd offered one an apple and got bitten. And he joined the cavalry to get over that phobia. He thought he would confront his fear head on.
Following on from the Blues and Royals, the Life Guards. The Life Guards, the senior regiment in the British Army, not the oldest, but the senior regiment. Their red tunics and their white plumes, inglorious as ever. And at the rear, the farriers, dressed in their dark blue tunics with their glinting axes. They're the ones in times gone by who would dispatch horses injured in battle. By the way, the farrier with the black plume is the farrier from the Life Guards. Trumpeter, Lance Corporal Grant Green of the Blues and Royals, sounds the command for the regimental trot to begin. Neutral trot, the Horse Guards trot by Evans.
Now just imagine how uncomfortable this is with all your kit on and the leather jack boots, which for the Household Cavalry have been waxed as well with beeswax. Very stiff, makes it very hard to feel your horse beneath you. And maintaining sitting trot in a military saddle is not something that you'd want to do for very long.
Music will change for the trot past. The keel row, which is traditional, has been in use for the best part of a century. Standard, passing the Queen, and it remains at carry. It's not lowered this time.
And probably the most experienced rider here, the Princess Royal.
Colonel-in-Chief, Colonel of the Blues and Royals.
The placing of the horses is very important. They tend to put the younger, less experienced ones into the middle of the line, so that if they do start to misbehave, they can't actually go anywhere, and the horses are only 6 inches apart, and you'll see as they come around the corner how they wheel and maintain their line.
Director of Music of Blues and Royals, Major Douglas Robertson. And the cattle drummers crossing sticks. That's their salute to the Queen as they pass the dais. Worth noting, Claire, that the drummers control the reins with their feet. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very hard thing to do, and the drum horses themselves are the biggest horses that you'll see on parade. They stand at around 17 hands 3 inches, which is well over 6 foot tall. Look at the hooves on them, great big feet.
Mounted bands move to the northern side of the parade ground. The field officer, brigade waiting, Lieutenant Colonel George Norton, signals the final birthday salute to the Queen. The Director of Music turns inwards, signal to the field officer that the Household Cavalry are back in position.
Guards! Royal salute! Present! Arms!
for the final happy birthday standard for the only time in this Queen's Birthday Parade actually touching the parade ground.
Guards, in close order, left and right, dress!
The guards dress, this time all the guards in one long ripple. Remarkable to think once again that this precise move is accomplished with no word of command being given.
Guards will form 3 ranks. Form 3 ranks. Guards will retire. About 10.
The order for the guards to retire.
At the halt. By divisions. Right form. Quick march.
Marching to the corps of drums, the adjutant by Burkitt. Composer Tom Burkitt was a Coldstream Guards drum major, and his musical talents were very apparent. He was a bandmaster of the central band of the Royal Military School. The mounted bands have already moved off the parade ground. Foot guards get ready to march off down the Mall.
Advance. About 10. Shots on the escort. Form close column. Remainder. Quick march.
So the guards all come right up to the escort itself, ready to march off. Marching to Prussian Glory by Piefke. A word about Piefke, Gottfried Piefke, 19th century composer, was a Prussian bandmaster, considered one of the outstanding figures in the world of military music. And this has become a very popular march of the corps of drums and military bands throughout the world. Household cavalry making its way up towards the approach road, along towards the Mall. Blues and Royals, and then the Life Guards.
Guards. Left. Dress.
Field officer will be waiting for the signal that all is eventually clear on the Mall for the guards to march away, and of course for the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh to start making their way back along the Mall towards Buckingham Palace. That's the Garrison Sergeant Major Bill Mott. He's the man whose duty it is today on his second birthday parade. Welsh Guardsman to give the signal that the Mall is eventually clear for the royal party. Lieutenant Colonel George Norton, Field Officer and Brigade waiting, now preparing to ask Her Majesty's permission to march off.
Your Majesty's Guards are ready to march off now.
George Norton prepares to give the final signal that all is clear. And Gerald, I suppose he'll be wondering to himself at this moment how Her Majesty's viewed events this morning.
He will, and he may get an indication as he follows Her Majesty's carriage off parade at the end of the parade. A lot of men out there have worked very hard today and will be very dry and hot and sweaty. And it's not over, certainly for the Inkerman Company, because from here they march to the palaces to mount the guard for 24 hours.
Some of the other royal guests who already left Horse Guards, they were the ones in Duke of Wellington's old office. Countess of Wessex, other guards looking on from the sides. Rear Admiral Tim Lawrence on their way back to Buckingham Palace. Now that they've gone past, Garrison Sergeant Major Bill Mott will be able probably to give the signal. And there we are. Signal for George Norton that all is clear. So for the march back to Buckingham Palace, marches Inkerman Company by R.B. Bashford, composed by Rodney Bashford, Director of Music of the Grenadier Guards, back in the 60s, 1960s. It was used in 1994 and in 1991. Senior Drum Major Andy Gray leading the massed bands across Horse Guards Parade. Be followed quite closely by the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. A 50-second parade, accompanied in the phaeton by the Duke of Edinburgh, Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. Gerald, it's that time again when I ask you for your verdict on the quality of today's parade.
Well, at the start, Hugh, I said we were looking for high standards of teamwork, of precision, and some style. And I think that's certainly what we got today. I thought it was a splendid parade and a marvellous way of saying officially happy birthday to the Queen for the 52nd time.
What message will you be delivering to the Inkerman Company after today?
They've done well, they've worked hard, and enjoy the next 24 hours on guard.
Claire, it's quite a sight, even for those of us who've been here before, but for someone here for her first visit, have you enjoyed?
I have. Some of it is like watching toy soldiers, and you can't believe that they look so tiny and everybody's doing exactly the same thing. And I think for those in charge of the horses, those that were mounted, they've been up since about 2 o'clock this morning getting those horses ready, and they look so well turned out, and all of them have behaved themselves impeccably. We had a little shout from Thor in the middle, but generally speaking, he was relatively quiet. And I think overall, it was an extraordinary sight. I have really enjoyed it. I marvel at it.
the consistency is remarkable, isn't it? Because maintaining that consistency for over an hour and a half it takes some doing.
And the impact as well, I think, just of 1,200 men and over 200 horses in a pretty small space, that really does hit you, and then you start to look at the finer points. And you know, Gerald is watching with an expert eye, and he can see when things go wrong. But just as a sort of naive observer, I'm amazed at it. Wonderful.
We're all amazed. So the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh return to Buckingham Palace, ready for the traditional fly past by the Royal Air Force to mark the Queen's official birthday for 2004. And you'll be able to see the fly past in our programme this evening. In years when our armed forces have seen action abroad, suffer losses, as they have again this year in Iraq, there's always a poignant reminder that this is far more than just a popular celebration. Once again this year, we've had a vibrant, colourful parade. From all of the BBC team on Horse Guards, goodbye